Well, I am rather busy.
Now he's going to move like right along to McGregor. That's his whole life, you know.
So one of the things I try to do when I'm watching these shows, and I'm not always successful at it, but I try to put myself in the mindset of, it's 1994 at this point, it's Friday night, and I've cracked open a beer, and I'm watching The X-Files, and these two episodes, how much of a holy shit moment were these two episodes when they aired? Because I did not expect, these were holy shit moments to me now.
Yeah, so I did not start watching the show, I think, until after these episodes had aired. I think that I started watching the show in the middle of the second season.
Okay.
So I did not know anything about this. Of course, people also watched television very differently back then, so it didn't necessarily matter all that much. And I think that these two episodes, of course, the first two part of The X-Files does, Duane Barry and Ascension, are...
Which I was not expecting, because they very cleverly did not call it part 1 and part 2. So that helped. It was very much a, how are they going to, oh shit, kind of moment.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think that these two episodes are interesting primarily because of we've talked a little bit before in the second season podcast of The X-Files about how the show feels more self-assured, more confident. It feels like it's really doing things and going places that maybe it wasn't in the first season. And these 6 episodes so far, I think, are... Now, obviously, of course, some of this was due to the fact that Gillian Anderson was pregnant, and they had to find a way to get rid of her for a couple episodes, because I don't think it's going to be a surprise that she's going to come back at some point.
Yeah.
She's not gone from the show for the rest of the season like Samantha. But it is the case where these 6 episodes do really feel like they were leading to the logical point of, there's one thing I can do. As of right now, I'm reopening the X-Files.
Yeah.
Now, of course, we will talk about Duane Barry. We will talk about Mulder as hostage negotiator. We will talk about Scully being kidnapped, where she is, perhaps, where she's not. We don't know. And all of these things, Krychek, Skinner, everything. But my first question for you is, how do you feel about how quickly or not the X-Files got reopened?
I can best answer that question with, so how long did it we're going to have to spoil DS9 a bit. How long did it take from Deep Space Nine being taken by the Dominion to it going back? That was only
I think that was either 6 or 8 episodes. I think it was 8.
It feels about the same amount of, number one, turbulence to the world, even though Deep Space Nine's world was a lot more lived in by that point, just based on... But it was such a premise-changing event that they gave the proper gravitas to, and that took long enough, but at the same time, it is premise-changing, and this is only Season 2 of The X-Files. I mean... It's the very show. It's the very show's name. It's not like the show is called The Mulder and Scully Adventures. And okay, well, we're closing the X-Files permanently, and then we're going to form our own supernatural detective agency. Like it's within the premise of the show that they are FBI agents. And so yes, I figured it would be opened again. That it was opened at this particular moment in this particular way. No, that was a very badass line in the context.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because of your reaction to Skinner in his first couple of appearances, because you seem to think he was a company man, you seem to think he was very straight-laced and that he was not into the X-Files at all, and I kept quiet and I kept information to myself, but he is not that person.
Well, I think the ending conversation makes it clear that although he was much more sympathetic than I initially thought, I think there has been a very subtle arc to Skinner over this, and coming at the end I think these episodes have been him largely behind the scenes realizing just how much he's being bullshitted and lied to, and Mulder was right, and Mulder is beginning to meet him halfway. I mean, let's put it this way. Mulder just doesn't come in ranting to Skinner at the end. He has the report. He has his evidence. He's able to prove his case to Skinner's satisfaction, which is what Skinner's been trying to get Mulder to do this entire time. Finally, Mulder's played ball a little, so Skinner is kind of meeting him there. And I think that says a bunch for him, too. Certainly, if he was harder in the beginning of the episode, of the season, so was Mulder.
Yeah, I think all that's right, because Skinner, to me, is obviously a character that I like a lot, and I think you're starting to like him, too.
Yeah.
Skinner always reads to me as someone who has risen to a certain level in the FBI, and seems to be that he was perhaps a really good investigator, got sent upstairs. Now he's in charge of people, reading reports, things of that nature, which is why he's so good at he's very, very good at calling people on their bullshit, and specifically Mulder on his bullshit, and saying, you need more evidence than this. You're not going to be able to prosecute this.
Yeah.
This is not going to go anywhere. And he's very hard on Mulder, I think, because he realizes that Mulder is very, very intelligent, very smart, a very good investigator, very observant, but that And I don't even think that Skinner is necessarily that hung up on the nature of the X-Files. I don't think he really thinks a lot about whether or not the supernatural exists or aliens exist. I think that he is a very evidence-based person, and he's going to go wherever the evidence takes him.
Yeah.
If Mulder comes to him and says, I have this proof of alien existence, look at it, it is irrefutable, and Skinner agrees, he's going to go, all right, that's fine. What are we going to do with this? So I like that about Skinner a lot, and I think he's pushing Mulder to be a better agent than Mulder perhaps would be. Not to say that Mulder in the first season was a bad agent, but sometimes he was pretty sloppy.
No, I mean, the way that they handle in the second episode, where they're treating the alien abduction stuff as just Duane Barry's delusion, and so he's going to go to this place where he believes that he was abducted by aliens. In a way, Skinner is handling that conversation where it doesn't matter what we believe actually happened. What matters is what Duane Barry is out there. He has killed somebody. He has kidnapped somebody. Where is he? And how do it's as, I mean, I'm remembering Scully's statement in the one with the disabled guy who is possessed by his brother's brain.
I don't remember the name of it either, but yeah.
But when she says at the end, like, all we know is Roland, yeah. At the end, when all Scully says is, well, all we know what happened is this, and this, and that's what happened, and he did it, and we don't know why, because they know they can't evidence-based explain away the psychic frozen brain.
Yeah. No, I think that's right, and I mean, I think that essentially Skinner is being hard on Mulder because his job is to know what is better for Mulder than what Mulder thinks is better for him, if you see what I'm saying. And the other part of Skinner, I think, is right, too, that he is realizing that you said exactly how much he's being lied to. And he is not someone who was afraid to ruffle feathers. I mean, the fact that it reopens the X-Files at the end of the end of the second episode of this week is indicative of that. He closed the X-Files because he was told to close the X-Files, and obviously, he sees exactly how far this goes. We don't know who Krychek actually is. Krychek has disappeared. He seems very, very upset by that. He seems very upset by the fact that the mysterious cigarette smoking man was using him. And he's like, well, fuck this.
Yeah, you're not playing ball. I'm not playing ball.
Right, exactly. And I like that about Skinner a lot.
Yeah.
I think it makes him a very interesting character, and it makes him a point of friction in a show that frankly, I think needed one.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think I see him as trying his best to ignore his gut saying that these people are lying to you, they're using you, they're not really, and you're not going to get anything out of this either, so really you're just a pawn in the conspiracy, and Mulder is really what pushes him over the edge and causes him to actually act.
Yeah. Now, moving aside from Skinner, what do you make of the developments in this episode, particularly talking about Duane Barry as an FBI agent, his abduction experiences, which may or may not be true? I think the fact that the show, especially in the second episode, Ascension, where it's not clear if what we're seeing Scully go through is actually happening, or that's what Mulder imagines is happening to her. I like that ambiguity a lot.
Yeah, when he's investigating her apartment in the beginning, and he's imagining the struggle that she had, we don't know if that was exactly what happened. It's probably fairly accurate, but that is in Mulder's mind. He's, how did this phone get smashed? Well, why is there blood on this table? Well.
Right, exactly. And I think that it's interesting to me that the show goes to the alien well so soon after the events of Little Green Men, the first episode of the second season. But in a way, it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Because what else would drive Skinner to so strongly reopen the X-Files basically immediately? And it is the alien conspiracy stuff because, as we see now, they are afraid of Mulder. They want Mulder shunted aside. They have realized that closing the X-Files is not enough, that the putting Scully on the X-Files was a mistake, that Scully is now gone, right? She has disappeared and no one knows where she is. And that Skinner decides that the best way to do that, of course, is to reopen the X-Files, because now, Mulder doesn't have his traditional partner in crime, as Scully is. But he now has the X-Files again. He has the resources of the X-Files. He has the resources of the FBI. And so he is going to be able to do that, and he is going to be able to bring Scully along for the ride again when Scully eventually comes back, as she is going to. Which
I will say, if you talk about time frame, I would not be surprised if the next episode she comes back, or at the very... I'm fairly sure next week we will be covering Scully's return. Again, it's the premise of the show, and they can't jettison the premise this early, and I don't think 1994 was the time where they would tell a story with that much distance in between, especially if the implication is that Scully is going to be alien pregnant, and that's how they're going to deal with the fact that she's visibly pregnant at this point in her acting career.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
No, we can talk about the production stuff, because I think that we've kind of, hinted around it a little bit.
Yeah.
But essentially what they did here, right, is that they're using the logical outcomes of the first season and saying, okay, well, they need to close the X-Files because of this reasons. It feels dramatically relevant. It feels like the right way to go. And, Fox did not want them to do that, but they did it anyway because they felt like it was dramatically relevant, and they went to the mat for that character beat or that story beat. And so the second season comes back, and they're using Scully less because Gillian Anderson is pregnant, which is fine, and that is definitely something that television shows do. And so it very nicely syncs up with the direction in which the meta story is going, right? Because Scully would, of course, not be around as much if the X-Files were closed. Mulder's off doing his wiretapping. Mulder's off doing whatever he's doing. Scully is back at Quantico teaching, but interestingly enough, they're still talking to each other. They're still engaged in a relationship, a friendship even at this point. And I like that a lot because it of course, the chemistry between Mulder and Scully is, if not the reason to watch all 10, certainly soon to be 11 seasons of the X-Files. It is a very, very strong reason to stick with the show throughout all of its run. But it goes a long way towards showing that, these characters now like each other, are friends, care about each other, perhaps even love each other to some degree, in a way that is divorced from their working relationship.
Yeah. As I said, I think they're starting to be surrogate brother-sister. I mean, the interactions between Mulder and Scully's mother are very, very tender and familial as well.
And I couldn't remember if they had met before.
I feel like they met briefly in maybe Beyond the Sea or something like that. Probably around. I mean, that's the only time we've seen Scully's mother, right?
Yeah, that was the only episode that she was in, I believe, and I think that it's possible that they met then. That certainly makes sense to me, because Mulder did seem to know who she was,
or even as simply on an episode where nothing was happened. Oh well, I'm meeting my mother for dinner. Why don't you come along? She could meet my FBI partner. I don't know, but there could be an event again that just took place off scenes. Either way. I mean, the implication is that they don't know each other well at this point, but that Scully's mother knows how close Scully feels about Mulder and is able to give him that same trust and tenderness, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's right. And of course, that goes a long way towards Mulder really selling Mulder's, I guess, his almost obsessive quest to get Scully back, to find her in the second episode, because this is not just his FBI partner. This is not just his work colleague. This is his friend. This is his surrogate sister in a way.
Yeah, this is his opportunity to make right Samantha.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that's also key to the second episode and how strong it is. That yes, Mulder would be very, very devoted and very, very obsessed with finding Scully because of a number of reasons that have nothing to do with his sister Samantha, but also there is that as well, that we know that Mulder is very obsessed with his sister. That is the primary reason why he got involved in the X-Files in the first place. And he doesn't want a repeat of that to happen again with someone who he cares about. He finds Scully to be very, very important to him, and he wants to get her back. Now, he will get her back. I don't think it's a mystery again that she will be coming back to the show, but it's important that it doesn't happen immediately, I think.
Yeah, because we need to have a situation of danger. We need to, I mean, we've seen how Mulder has gotten with Scully just in another area, where they're just not working in the same office and they don't see each other every day. To have her assumedly off planet and in a very dangerous, painful situation is, again, if they didn't reopen the X-Files in this episode, I think Mulder would be completely lost. At least he has, at this point, Skinner, who's going to keep him on track and keep him making sure he eats and all of that right now. Yeah, exactly. Because I think Mulder is going to be pretty out of it for a while. I think that's the implication. Yeah. Now let's let's talk about the ways in which Mulder and Scully really approach, I think, in the first. I mean, again, like usually when we talk about two-parters in the same podcast, we're not really going to talk about them as separate episodes because it's very difficult to, and there's really no reason to. So we'll just kind of go between the episodes. But in a certain sense, this is, by my count, the second or third time that they have had strong, irrefutable proof that aliens exist, and it's been taken from them yet again. Now. Yeah, you could read this in one of two ways. You could read this as Mulder and Scully are incompetent, or you could read this as whatever this conspiracy is that involves the cigarette smoking man and now Krychek, who was able to get people as impersonating FBI agents, and the assistant director of the FBI has nothing to do with it and has no knowledge of it, indicates that they have powerful connections in the government that have nothing to do with the FBI necessarily. That they are just really, really good at covering this stuff up, and they don't really care who gets hurt in the process. That's how I'm reading it too. Yeah, they're that good. Again, in the pilot, essentially, it's only luck and the fact that Scully just has the evidence in her pocket that get that. And I think at this point they've learned to compensate for that. And if Scully and Mulder haven't quite clicked onto, and if they're on the losing side right now, it's just because they haven't been able to figure out how to turn the tables yet. Well, we know they are going to probably they're going to have some victories soon, I would say, but maybe a victory.
So I guess, I think that's right. And I guess my question for you is, Scully in the first episode, Duane Barry. So this character of Duane Barry, who is a former FBI agent who was in essentially a mental hospital / prison. Had this,
which we've seen a few of in this series.
Yeah, that is definitely a thing in the X-Files.
This will be a location we get to. Yeah,
yeah. That place again. Okay, sure. I get this. That he had this thing happen. He was shot in the head or something like that, and it pierced a region of his brain. He became very violent. He became a pathological liar. He lost his family. He lost his job. It was a bad situation. It was just a bad series of events for this guy, Duane Barry. And, Scully is very devoted to Mulder. Mulder is in this very precarious situation that CCH Pounder has put him in. And she immediately rushes to Virginia to, find out what exactly is going on and to tell Mulder, and she wants to be there for him. And then, of course, that turns out to be the way that Duane Barry kidnaps her. But I guess my question for you is, you've got this kind of idea of this conspiracy as very powerful, as able to kill people, essentially, to put people in positions of power, of authority all over the place, to have people in the FBI that are affecting things greatly. The cigarette smoking man travels between the FBI headquarters and the Pentagon, and who else knows? Maybe the White House. We don't know. Do you believe the evidence that Scully has about Duane Barry? I mean, because in my mind, the man has obviously been kidnapped by aliens, but Scully seems to think that he is a liar because of this information about the problem that he has had with his brain. I don't know if that information is true.
Well, I'll put it this way. After the hostage situation is dealt with and Mulder's in the hospital and CHH Pounder's talking about the pieces of metal implanted and stuff, I feel like she examined enough of what was going on to ask the question, well, was he actually shot in the head too? That would be able to at a hospital, they would be able to very quickly tell whether he had sustained the injury. And so I would assume that if the implication was that he hadn't, they would have figured that out. I don't know. That's my view is that, yes, he was both shot and kidnapped by aliens, and that it's unfortunate that this guy got a really shitty end of the stick, or maybe even, isn't it even possible that getting shot is what attracted the aliens to him? I mean, is that outside the realm of possibility?
I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility. And I think that, we do have to kind of grapple with the fact that the X-Files, of course, is of a time and place when these sorts of alien abductions by these gray, what they would call grays, was a staple of American culture and life. Yeah. And it is something that is, I think, hard to remember now if you didn't grow up in that era, because people just don't talk about this kind of thing as much anymore. I'm sure people still think they're being abducted by aliens, and I'm sure it's still out there.
Well, it's like how 10 years ago zombie stories were so fucking huge and popular and everything was a zombie. And you'll still see zombie stories, but they're not as... It's just not the trend anymore. So yeah, the trend was alien stories. The trend is vampires every so often. That's just how it was.
Yeah, I think that's actually a good summation of it. And so, to me, you have to say, okay, well, the X-Files was obviously tracking in that because it was something that Chris Carter was interested in.
Yeah.
He was using something that was in the zeitgeist of the time to tell some stories that he wanted to tell. So Duane Barry being abducted by these types of aliens is one thing. Having these types of alien abductions in the universe of the X-Files is one thing. But they seem to have a purpose that is outside of what we would consider to be real. Because part of it is that I don't think that some sort of government conspiracy to cover up the fact that aliens exist was a primary feature of the alien abduction myth. Certainly it was part of it, but it was not something that was necessary for the myth to propagate. And so... I don't know. I mean, do you feel like the X-Files is doing enough with the concept that justifies everything else that is sort of ancillary to it? Krychek, the cigarette smoking man, kind of stuff.
No, I think it's... I read an interesting review of all things Eyes Wide Shut and talking about, how it focuses on these super rich people having these weird ritualized orgies, right? And the view of that is that nobody believes that this is actually happening, but this is a metaphor for rich people are doing these weird, fucked up, horrible things to other people, and this is happening, and this is something that you have no access to, and it's this mysterious world. I think the point of the X-Files is less that, I think the government is really covering up existence of aliens, but the government covers things up. The government parts of the government view their power as absolute and view that they know better for their citizenry and that they have the right to hide the truth. And, I mean, our government's doing that, trying to do that with global warming. That has nothing to do with aliens. It doesn't really matter. Aliens are the MacGuffin. Yes, they're the MacGuffin that was super popular in that day and in that time, and... again, they were at least vaguely related. Things like Men in Black stories have always been a part of alien narratives, but I think aliens are a metaphor for just something that the government is hiding.
No, I actually think that's a really good summation of it. And I think that it says more about Chris Carter's worldview, perhaps, than anything that is inherent in the story. And I'm saying that for a particular reason because of season 10 of The X-Files, which we will get to in a while. And we'll see what happens with season 7 of The X-Files. I obviously have not seen that yet because it is supposed to start filming this summer. Now, let's talk about Krychek. He is a character that was introduced very abruptly. It made sense because Krychek Mulder needs a new partner, and he obviously needs someone who is going to play the role of Scully to some degree. But then he's not who we think he is at all.
One of the things I will say that I like about the way the show is doing, and again, this is more talking. This is slightly less a Krychek conversation and more the style of storytelling on the X-Files, but we don't get any exposition on who Krychek is. We are expected to know at this point. Now, yes, he's only been was only an episode previously, but nobody says, and as you know, you're pretending to work for Mulder and Skinner, but you're really working for, just as Deep Throat's replacement isn't given any fanfare. I do really I like the way that they respect that. We have been following along, but
yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot to be said for. I keep waiting for a book or an article or something to really examine and investigate the changes in television storytelling over a period of time, using examples and really sort of analyzing it. And I think that, I'm never going to make one because I don't have the training or the frankly interest to do that. But
we could write one together.
Okay, let's do that.
Yay.
That I think that, like we've talked about in the past, The X-Files is a very influential show in the ways in which it threaded this narrative, these sort of character beats through the show without really telling you who they were, what they were doing. Now, of course, we're watching this on Hulu. I don't know if they took the previously ons out. I don't know if they existed. I don't know if they did that back then. I don't remember if they were a feature of the X-Files when it was first aired. It's possible that it was and they stripped them out. But I do think it speaks to the fact that the X-Files part, and we'll grapple with this, I think, as the X-Files podcast go on, because the X-Files, of course, became this huge top 10 hit that maybe it became a huge top 10 hit because it was so dense and because it was so imbued with this sort of respect for its audience, I guess.
Well, put it this way, only like 2-3 years earlier, Twin Peaks was on, and that was a huge phenomenon too, and people went crazy for it because it was like nothing else that had been on TV. It had this continuity that really wasn't done in primetime shows, things like that. And so even though that petered into nothing, a lot of people would say, I think that in many ways, watching this Twin Peaks really did prime the pump for the X-Files. And the X-Files was, I think, for whatever flaws that it may have, I think it was the better done version of the two concepts, just in terms of being a critical success, being a commercial success. I think Twin Peaks had more flaws in it. It didn't get to finish, really.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I mean, part of why Twin Peaks went away is because David Lynch got bored with it. But and then Chris Carter never gets bored with the X-Files. I mean, he is still not bored of the X-Files because he's still involved in making new X-Files. And this has been his goal for years, ever since the show was canceled. So I don't know. I think that we kind of elided the Krychek conversation. And I don't know that there's a ton to say about Krychek because, frankly, we just don't know enough about him as a character, and I think that we don't really know who the real Krychek is. Maybe there isn't a real Krychek. Maybe he is just a bald-faced liar, and he is whoever the people that he's with want him to be.
Well,
he is obviously a plot device. Well, no, okay.
Because in this he's very frustrated in the cigarette smoking man conversation. I mean, he literally says, why don't we just kill Mulder? And I mean, he pushes the point because originally he's like, it's not our policy. And this again, we need to deal with that conversation of why they don't just kill Mulder. And the explanation is that basically at this point, enough people know who Mulder is that if he gets killed, it's going to look so suspicious, and that they still think there is a chance of discrediting him, edging him out, and all of those things. Again, which is another reason that reopening the X-Files is such a strong stance, because it is a backing of everything Mulder is saying. I get the sense that the original plan for Krycek and everybody might have been that I think they were going to try and kill Scully and blame it on Duane Barry. And, it's very good for them that Scully is missing, because that leaves Mulder rudderless, which they know. It's very bad for them that they don't seem to know where she is either, because they probably want her dead and out of the picture, because she is less famous at this point. And again, she's abducted by a guy and she goes missing. They're going to make their assumptions, and they have plausible deniability why she's gone.
Yeah.
That's who I think Krycek wants to be. I think Krycek, I don't know, he seems a little too eager to pistol whip the poor operator. I think he does have some bloodthirst to him.
I don't think that's wrong, and I will leave it at that. Maybe informed by things that are coming down the pike. I don't think this is not going to be the last time we see Krycek.
Oh no, I know. I mean, he's starting to rail against the fact that he's not quite as far along or in charge or his own master as he wants to be, I think.
Yeah, that was where I was going with that. Is I think in that conversation he has with the cigarette smoking man in the car, Krycek is someone who is part of this conspiracy, but he is a low-level flunky, perhaps. He is the muscle. And I think he's starting to realize that while he is okay to do that for a while, he is okay to be the flunky, be the intern, get the coffee, essentially. He doesn't want to do that forever. And what becomes clear to me is how frustrated he is, because the cigarette smoking man is kind of basically telling him that's not going to happen. Krycek might even be a little stupid.
Yeah, I don't know. He's so smart he becomes stupid, I think, because look at where he is most of his day. He is around Mulder and Skinner and people who are so dumb because they don't know what's really going on, and he's easily, effortlessly lying to them, and he's got all the cards, and he's on the real powerful, secretive side, and people are making him get coffee. Even what the cigarette smoking man is telling him to do is the equivalent of getting coffee.
Yeah. Now, I think the other part of this, of course, is something you said earlier, which is that the conspiracy that exists, why don't they just kill Mulder? Okay, yeah. That's a good question. And I think the show is smart to. One of the things I appreciate about the X-Files, at least, early on, is that it does not sidestep those questions. It does ask them, and it does say, hey, you know what? This makes sense. Why wouldn't they just kill Mulder?
And I respect that, because I want the show to be as smart as the viewer, because the viewer recognizes those things. And the big questions are going to be problems.
Right. And so I think that if you think back to an episode like the character of I forget his name, the nightcap guy, Max.
Oh, yeah.
And then also think about the lone gunman, of course. I know your favorite recurring character is the lone gunman, who Mulder is somewhat famous. People know who Mulder is in these circles, in these sort of alien conspiracy circles. Aliens really exist. What is happening? What is going on? Circles. We want to uncover the truth circles. Mulder is kind of not their leader, but he is someone who they respect and follow a great deal. So why don't they just kill Mulder? I think they don't kill Mulder because Mulder is useful, because if they can convince, and they meaning the conspiracy, can convince Mulder that aliens don't exist, that's going to be huge for them, right? Because Mulder coming out publicly or not and saying, you know what, I don't think aliens exist anymore. I think it's all just this. And I have all this evidence that shows that it's not, or I've investigated it for 10 years and I've never really found any evidence that it's real, and it's all this kind of elaborate shell game, right? It's a weapons program
that would
by the
be
federal
even
government or whatever.
That would be even worse for them. Hell, I mean, people think the Pizzagate shooter who found no children in the basement is part of the Pizzagate conspiracy. If Mulder comes out and says there's no aliens, well, they got to him. If they shoot
right.
Mulder, they got to him. So really, they just want him.
It doesn't matter what they do.
They're trying to bury him in wiretaps. That's really what that was what they tried to do over the first few episodes. Just get him so busy and burnt out and tedious that he just gives the fuck up. And especially with Scully out of the picture, he is more inclined to give up or blow himself up or do something very dangerous. There are so many ways that Mulder can blow himself up, and I think they're just trying to find the most subtle way of putting gasoline around him.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Which makes it so weird that the beginning of this two-parter is Mulder essentially showing up to this hostage negotiation because they called him and said, hey, we want you to come to this hostage negotiation. And Mulder's like, I don't have any hostage negotiations experience. Why am I here?
Which I will say I found surprising given his previous line as a profiler. You would think that there would be a situation where, at least one situation where a killer that he knew intimately from his profiling, he would be very much a good person to have this conversation with. But anyway.
Yeah, but I think that is separate from the kinds of experience or techniques that hostage negotiators use.
Fair enough.
And to be clear, I mean, he's not great at it.
Yeah,
he's okay. He's okay at it as soon as they tell him what to do. But once he starts riffing and improvising, when he has been taken hostage by Duane Barry, and he's making very bad mistakes.
Well,
he's asking Duane Barry if he's lying, and of course that's exactly the wrong thing that you want to say to someone who is mentally unstable.
Well, I think the thing with Mulder is that it's almost you have to wonder if he was put in this position to fuck up again. But because let's put it this way, FBI agent fucks up a case and, all these hostages die. That's a really good way of discrediting Mulder. That has nothing to do with, but I mean, if this had been just any other situation, if this had been the guy that he's been listening to wiretap, finally, holds a couple of the strippers he's always talking about hostage, and Mulder is sent in to deal with that. It's a non-alien case. He would probably be able to stick to the script because he's able to very clearly see what's going on in this situation. This situation is muddied by the fact that Duane Barry seems to have had an experience that Mulder believes in very strongly, and if this guy is a genuine abductee, and Mulder believes in genuine abductees, then this is a horse of a different color, really, than everything that he is claiming, and the demands that he's making are a little less unreasonable.
Yeah, no, I think that's all right. And I don't know that I have the answer to that.
Yeah.
I don't know if Mulder was sent here to fuck up. I don't know if Mulder was sent there because maybe CCH Pounder just thought that he would be useful because he had this experience of alien abductions, and this guy, Duane Barry, says he was abducted by aliens.
Yeah, he's famous in the department, second somebody mentioned aliens. Well, actually, no, a really brilliant profile who totally believes in this stuff, give him a call, that kind of a thing.
And it could be both, right? I mean, it could be CCH Pounder saying, yes, I think I want this guy to come, and it could also be the fact that they engineered Mulder going there because they knew he would be discredited. We don't know. And I think it's to the show's credit that it's able to put these sort of layers on it and have these sort of questions and not have it be answered and still have it be satisfying and have it be dramatically interesting.
Well, isn't that kind of a trick in a way? And I mean this in the most positive or neutral terms, in that this is a show that's dealing with shadowy conspiracies and nobody has the full picture and, what's going on and mystery and everybody's lying. And so if we have 3 different scenarios as to how a character could have gotten there in the first place, that only adds to the very confused and cryptic vibe of the rest of the show.
Yeah, no, I think that's true.
I mean,
that's true.
Certainly when Janice from Friends says, oh, my friend knew you on the Toombs case, there is no mystery there, and that was fine for the episode, but that's definitely around here.
Yeah. And I actually think it's interesting that character is so weird because I don't know that character would really feel. That character would feel out of place in the second season of this show.
Yeah, I could definitely see that.
Yeah. Well, I guess maybe the last thing to talk about before we wrap this episode up is so Scully is at the supermarket buying a tremendous amount of groceries for $11.14.
Buying a jar of pickles and paying with a check.
Yeah. R.I.P. 1994 when you could buy $50 of groceries for $11.14 and pay for it with a check. But and I don't know that you can really answer this question, and I don't know that there's a lot to talk about right now, but I just want to raise it as an interesting point, is that A, do you believe that Scully was abducted by aliens or not? Or do you believe the conspiracy abducted her and is pretending that she was abducted by aliens? And the follow-up question to that is, what do you think that's going to do to Scully? Because either way, she was abducted by either aliens or people that were pretending they were aliens.
Well, I do know that pregnant Scully with some kind of a thing is a thing. I have no idea how that plot point gets resolved or even developed, but I mean, they would. Let me put it this way.
I mean, let's put it this way: that Gillian Anderson was not going to be pregnant much longer because that was her real pregnant stomach, and she was very pregnant when they filmed that scene.
I do feel like they wouldn't have gone through the bother of doing that particular shot if it was just a fantasy sequence and just a kind of a little in-joke with the production and to fool the audience. I don't think they would have done that. So when we see her, she is either going to be pregnant or have just delivered a baby. So whoever did that happens. And I think part of this episode is beginning to suggest that there is not that much of a difference. Again, there are some kind of government agent Men in Black types that seem to be following Duane Barry around. So certainly there is and at this point the show has sold me on there are 500 shadow governments within the government, and so at least one of them is pro-alien working with the alien. We know that from the season from the Erlenmeyer flask though. Yeah.
That is true, yeah, and you know, speaking of the Erlenmeyer flask, we have yet another appearance of the new Deep Throat, who doesn't really give Mulder any help, but just says, "Hey, this guy is not going to be able to help you anymore." So
yeah, his presence in this episode was just a hey, remember I exist, but it's good to have the reminder.
Yeah, but I agree with you that it's hey, I still exist, but I also think that him showing up in that particular moment is trying to show the audience or tell the audience that Mulder's options are closing.
Yeah. And
Senator Matheson is not going to be able to help him anymore, or at least not in this way.
And frankly, it also does suggest that Deeper Throat may be not quite so callous as he claimed that he was in his first appearance, because he didn't need to make the trip out to the senator's office either. You know, Mulder could have just knocked on the door and no one was answering. Like, all he did was... So, you know, now, of course, this doesn't preclude the possibility that Deeper Throat is lying, but I don't, know if that's where the show's going with it. I don't think that's where it's going with it. But I don't know.
We'll have to find out where it goes with that.
I mean, really, the show has genuinely made me believe that. Really, when Mulder says it, and when Scully says it, as long as they're not compromised by certain emotional events in their lives or they're being manipulated, they probably mean it. And I realize, that just means that I can't trust a fucking thing on this show.
Well, I think the show is starting to work for you. It sounds like it is.
I mean, I guess
you were...
Well, one thing that I, didn't even bring up is, why don't they kill him? Well, Mulder can so easily be manipulated too. How many times has he been manipulated in this series? You really just need to push him slightly, and he'll go off on his own. And so they can control Mulder.
Yeah. All dogs are aliens, Mulder. Oh my God.
Oh.
Well, the last thing I want to mention before I wrap this episode of the podcast up, I would be very remiss if I did not mention briefly David Duchovny in a Speedo.
How hard do you think he lobbied to have that shot?
I don't care because he got that shot.
Probably not very.
All right. Well, if you have any thoughts on either of these episodes, Duane Barry or Ascension, please leave a comment on the post for this episode of the podcast at tuninginshow.com. You can check out our Patreon at patreon.com/truckaboutshow if you would like to give us a little bit of financial support if you enjoy our podcasting endeavors. Coincidentally enough, it also supports our other podcast, Trek About. We are in the second season of Star Trek Voyager. This week we are talking about the episodes Tattoo and Cold Fire. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, we are on all those places. Tuning In Show is our username, so please go follow us, share us, like us, whatever things the kids are doing these days. Just don't Snapchat us because neither of us understand what the point of Snapchat is.
I don't even have one. I'm never going to have one. No, you can't make me. All right, I'll download it.
And as always, please leave us an iTunes review for tuning in. It is the best way for new people to find the show, and it makes us feel good. Next week, we are going to be talking about the X-Files episodes 3, the letter 3, the number 3. It's not a letter, it's a number.
But it's like
number
episode
3.
7 or 8.
It's very confusing, I know. And One Breath.
Mac, why do you...